Well, hello everyone, and welcome to one more episode of Tactical Periodisation Moments. This is the name we got for this, Brian. Sorry, I didn't tell you, but there's a name. It's a podcast, and it's brought to you by the official School of Tactical Periodisation. On each episode, we invite one coach and talk to him or her for about 30 minutes and try to extract as much juice as possible from their experiences. We'll try to invite coaches from all over the world with different kinds of cultures and different kinds of experiences. So that's what we're going to do. So thank you everyone for staying tuned and keep listening, because today we have a very special guest for us. Follow our social media, subscribe our channels, and keep supporting us as you always do. We are on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, Spotify, you name it. And speaking of which, by the way, kids, please stay away from screens and social media. They lead you nowhere, except if it's our channel. With no further ado, let me introduce you all listeners to Brian Zwaschka from California. I never know if I say your name right or not. Sorry, one more time about that. From the United States of America. He is currently, and you will correct me shortly after I say this, and for the last 13 seasons, the head coach of the Fresno State women's soccer team. And we thank you for accepting our invitation for this. It's an absolute honor for us to have you, Brian.
Thank you. It's an honor for me to be part of this.
Well, I'd like to maybe start with that before the first question. 13 seasons, it's a lot. Did you ever think you'd go so far? How's it like to be 13 years in a row in a club?
Yeah, I mean, it goes fast, to be honest. But you know, when you take a position, I remember my first contract was actually for 5 years, which is becoming less and less common as it is. But when you first have that contract, of course, you're thinking, okay, I need to do something right in these 5 years, either to advance my career in the same position or move to another position. And here I am 13 seasons in, so something's been going okay.
Yes, that's for sure. Okay, can you tell us please a little bit about your path as a coach?
Okay. Well, I have been, like most people, playing the game, you know, from a pretty young age. Here in the United States, the game certainly wasn't nearly as popular as it is now, or as accessible as it is now, compared to when I was growing up. So it was a challenge, but it was because of, you know, people that had immigrated from other countries around the world that really were responsible, I think, across the country for bringing the game to smaller communities. And at some point I started playing and fell in love with it and just carried on playing. And here, athletics and academics is a model that is like nowhere else in the world. So it's very typical to play in your school environment, in your school setting. And so I did that through high school and in the college environment as well. I played for 4 seasons while I was earning my degree. And then after that, I ended up playing semi-professionally and professionally for as long as I could, till I was about 30. And along the way, I was coaching youth teams and camps and individual trainings and things like that to make a living, but also to stay connected in the game and share the things that I was learning along the way. So, and I always enjoyed that. So it was probably pretty natural at some point when I was going to be done playing that I would carry on in the game in some way, and coaching has been that vehicle. So I actually didn't finish my college degree originally, and so when I was done playing professionally, I actually returned to finish my degree, and that was when I actually got into college coaching, because that was part of my agreement with the university to finish my degree was to actually help with the men's program. And so that was a great kickstart in both ways, to finish my degree as well as get involved with the college game. So yeah, and then from there, at some point I moved over to the women's side in a really good position. And since I've moved around the country and have now ended up in California at Fresno State, and in our community too, we formerly had a semi-professional team here locally that played a short season over the summer, which actually I became the head coach of for a couple of seasons, and that worked really well because it didn't interfere with my university position. And since there's a really cool project, since then a local investor has actually purchased that and is turning it into a full-fledged professional team. So that's a really exciting project that's happening here in our community as well. So that's called Central Valley Fuego, and the league is 2 leagues below MLS, and they'll look for some kind of promotion into the championship, which is the second league within 5 years is the plan. So building a new stadium and those types of things are underway. So it's a really cool project here locally that I'll also be assisting with.
Yeah, well, one main idea that I have about the United States, it's something that emerges from that, is that when you guys put something in your head, it goes ahead really fast. You put in practice whatever means you have and whatever is necessary to start something. And that's something that we should learn from, at least here in Portugal. Well, soccer has been growing a lot in the States, as you said. It was quite different back in your days when you were playing. Well, not that long ago, you played with us here in Porto, and you still have it. Let me
maybe not the movement so much.
But in a country that is so strong in basketball, football, baseball, among other gymnastics, and even surfing, do you think that soccer already has its space in sports there?
I think that's something that certainly has grown significantly, and in particular in the professional ranks with the MLS. If you think about it, when the league started, there were 8 teams, and now I think there's slated like 33 teams across the country. And don't get me wrong, it's obviously a massive country, so there's still a lot of areas that are probably not really served by quote unquote a local team, but certainly regionally it's covering most bases at this point. And those are the types of things that it needs, because with the professional teams and the professional games and professional leagues, that's where TV comes into play. And we know that with TV and other forms of media, that's where the real exposure happens. And so that's obviously a combination of responsibility for the kind of explosion that's happened with the game, but equally this USL league that has essentially taken responsibility for the lower tiers of the game in our country, that's exploded and gotten a lot more interest as well, because we're a country where the sports happen on a franchise basis. So somebody with just a ridiculous amount of money can decide to purchase a franchise, and everything has to be right, but we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars. And what the USL represents is a better sort of combination of entry points into leagues. So the championship would be considered the second division, and obviously it's not on the scale, even though the caliber might not be that different from MLS. It's not on the scale in terms of responsibilities for the clubs financially to exist. And then the next tier down is USL League One, which is overall the third level, which is where our local team will be entering play. And again, that offers yet another entry point that's a little bit lower financially, that allows the exposure for more players, more opportunities for people to expand into professional at a lower league. And then below that, the USL has also been responsible, along with some other leagues, for expanding the amateur senior game. So semi-professional, and that's just exploded as well, because financially the entry point for a local community into those leagues is a lot more doable, and so all these things have, you know, emerged and improved over the last 20 years, along with MLS, and so the real infrastructure is finally becoming properly established. And the only disappointment is probably that there isn't going to be promotion and relegation, but the closest thing maybe we can come to that experience is that we do have the US Open Cup, which is similar like to the FA Cup in England and cups elsewhere. Every country has their own league cup where the amateur levels can compete, and there's been some great stories and competitions that have gone on with that. So yeah, I mean, these things all come into play in the exposure from the grassroots up to the professional level. It's been exciting.
Well, women's soccer is huge there. I'm guessing bigger than men's, at least in titles, right? Well, the women's soccer team is 4 times world champion. First time in 91, I'm guessing. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
And that was 31 years ago, 30 years ago. To continue such a path in title is a big thing. When you talk about 30 years, 30 seasons, it's at least 3 generations of players. Many things change in 30 years. How much has changed since that? Because you've continued to be world champions along the years. Last time 2018, 2019. So it was just around the corner.
Yeah.
So you went from 30 years ago world champion to the last world championship champion. So how do you keep it going?
Yeah, and what's interesting is that, you know, a lot, like I said, a lot of people across the world wouldn't even really understand necessarily what the college model is here, where the combination of sport and academics is very strong in our country, and there's no question that that originally that was one of the things that was a foothold for the women's game in the United States, is that the universities were responsible, essentially, in lieu of professional teams. The universities themselves were responsible for producing players at a high level, and it was extremely competitive. And you know, the spirit and the dedication that comes from people playing for their universities is really remarkable in our country, and that's across all sports, you know. And probably the most visible are American football and basketball, but certainly, you know, when the universities are household names like the professional teams, then you know something special is happening. And it's been a model that has allowed, on the women's side in particular, the right financing, because we have very specific laws called Title IX here that protect and serve both genders in terms of equal support educationally and equal support in terms of anything that's connected to an academic environment. And so when sports are connected to it, that's created an incredible financial stage for women's sports, and that certainly has been the consistent, feeding ground over the years up into our national ranks, because a pro league has not existed here that long, and the pro leagues financially have struggled a little bit. So that couldn't be necessarily a singular reliable source for players. So the universities have played a huge role in that, and that continues.
Well, yes, and it's been quite a ride. Do you think that there's a logic from kids playing and getting into the first team or the college team? Do you think that they are that there's a logical way on that, like grassroots training until the first team or the college team before the professionals, or even the professionals in college? Do you think that that's something that's established or not so much?
It's an interesting melange, because here the club systems are very much a pay-to-play model. I mean, that's very typical, and that, so there is massive exposure from a very young age of opportunities for kids to play. The typical model in our country is that kids join clubs independent of schools that have more consistent training, and they have professional coaches hired and directors of coaching, similar to an academy model elsewhere. And so that's usually the pathway. But along the way, as I mentioned, a lot of kids continue to play also for their schools, because there's a certain, a certain sense of spirit and local connection in that sense as well. So a lot of kids play through their high schools, and it's from those clubs and high schools that kids get recruited into various levels of the college game. It can't go without saying that these are great opportunities for kids to get higher education, some of it paid for by scholarship, but equally for them to have that connection with their university and the sports teams, it creates a great experience across that time as well.
Okay. Well, I'm a big fan of street soccer. Street soccer in the sense of kids playing on their own and organizing themselves on the street. Not as much street soccer as a tournament of street soccer, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Without the adult supervision or teaching or conditioning, apart from the mother or grandmother shouting for the kid to go to dinner.
Mm-hmm.
Do you still see kids in the United States playing soccer in the streets? Or do you see them playing basketball?
Yeah, I think it's way more common with basketball, but it's very rare, if I'm honest with you, about soccer. I rarely see that, and I don't know if it's a safety thing. I don't know if it's a just convenience thing. I don't know if it's been sort of a deadening over time because of the club environment where everything is structured, and so that's everybody's idea of how to improve is that coaching is always required, and that you have to be in a consistent academy setting. I'm not sure, but I think culturally in our country, the only place that we really see that is in basketball, in my opinion.
Okay. Well, I'm guessing that you are a Tactical Periodization fan.
Yes. This is true.
Yes. Since you were a player and now that you have that college and also coaching experience, um, do you feel differences between the methodological path between your career as a player and now as a coach? Do you see the difference in the country, the way the coaches see methodology? And I mean, what's the mainstream, what's the methodological mainstream in the United States, and or has it changed along the years?
Yeah, no, I think that it's really difficult in our country with the size of it to create, certainly a singular idea or a mainstream, but you can imagine that, the physical side has truly driven athletics and continues to, and I don't honestly see that going away. And part of that is probably born of the extent of track and field here and the Olympics, but also American football, which is a very extreme power sport, and it's truly a requirement of the game to add size, to add power, to add muscle for the sake of not being fragile because of the kind of collisions that the athletes have to endure. But obviously that transfers over into other sports that have been traditionally quite popular, like basketball, and the idea of continuing to increase size and power is just a necessity in those sports, quite frankly. And so, it's the systematic approaches in those respects have really been making sure that that's part of the overall curriculum. Even if it's trained in isolation, it's distinctly part of the curriculum, and I don't see that going away. I think that there's, it's understood that there's less of a necessity in particular for size, meaning muscle girth, in the sport of soccer. So I don't think that it's had the same overall approaches, but certainly it is still considered an integral part of training in most environments, if people are serious about their athletics. Swimming as well. Swimming, yeah. I don't know if that fully answered your your question, but going back to your question about the differences that I see, absolutely. From personal experience, I remember, one of the expressions in my generation was "no pain, no gain," which was a really horrible thing to have to experience, because it's not that I didn't understand the spirit of it, and the idea of being resilient and robust and being able to endure things, and from that standpoint, of course, I appreciate it and probably gained from it, but from the standpoint of being really intuitive about the needs of the team and individuals within the team, and the idea that there are more efficient and effective ways to just purely make a better team. Yeah, a lot of that was easily excused by the idea of the need for the physical and the need for just being tough, no pain, no gain.
Yes, of course. We've all been through pre-seasons where we didn't touch the ball even.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah. Apart from the medicine ball, of course.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
How do you feel that your methodological choice got in touch with your girls in the team? Do you feel like they accepted it quite well, or what were the main difficulties you experienced, if any?
I think that, yeah, no, I think that if there's been any difficulties, it's the ones that have grown up in very specific club and high school environments where maybe they had a very specific like lifting regimen, or they, what's very popular also in our country is people getting personal trainers. So they have a personal trainer that helps them work on their fitness. And one of the challenges that we have is when we know that based on our game model, based on our ideas, and based on position specific, requirements that we envision for players, that sometimes these other methods from personal trainers actually work against the player. And so it takes some convincing, getting them into our environment and working through our principles, but just our daily training, like how systematically we try to improve the players. They start to recognize that they are gaining the fitness levels and the physical requirements that before they were sensing that they needed to work on, in isolation, separate from it. And it has taken some time, but for the most part, there's nothing but interest and excitement about that, because the players then start to recall sessions that they've done where they've done only fitness work in isolation, and it's really torture, and I think that when I reference my own experiences and I recognize how now we're approaching our own training with the methodology, I'm so jealous of my own players that didn't get to improve under this methodology by comparison.
Yes, I completely understand. Well, I have to know that we are 7 minutes away we still have 7 minutes for this interview, and if any of you listeners have further questions, I have a lot of questions. I just don't have time for them, maybe one or two more. But if any of you would like to ask Brian anything, you can get in touch with us, and I'll see that he gets your questions, and I can ask him to answer them for you. No problem. So, Brian, what would be your main 3 advices for me if I were to come to the United States to coach? Now you've seen a little bit of the Portuguese culture and how we do stuff, how we do things, more or less, more than my own of the United States for sure. But what would you recommend? Three main things for us Portuguese guys or girls to go there and coach?
I think that, one of the things that I appreciate about the methodology in tactical periodization is that it's not mandating that you coach exactly a certain way, and there is openness to the idea that each culture and each team is going to have something unique, and certainly the things that we've just been talking about in the US with the fitness in isolation and personal trainers and things like that. I think that becomes a big shock, I guess, and some people like it and appreciate it and get excited by it because it's a very commercial thing here as well. But I don't think that you could fully avoid it. And so I think it's about remaining open and trying to think about, if the only thing is the tactical periodization, I think you have to be equally careful about the idea of being completely closed to things that are very ingrained in our culture, and one of those things would be the physical. The other thing that certainly we notice at the university setting and when I've been involved with professional teams is travel is immense. It's just such a massive country that sometimes for matches that we have to ride on a bus for a couple hours, and then we're on a flight, and then we're on another bus for a couple hours by the time we get there. Sometimes we're switching 2 flights just to get to the single destination. And these are things that are truly exhausting that oftentimes coaches have never even had to even think about because normally they're used to just bus travel, like some of the longest trips we took when I was playing in France, for example, or in England were 3 hours, and for here that might be a short trip, so
Yeah.
3 hours might be quite normal, or 4 hours, but anything over that you're probably flying and then also busing to some degree. So the travel is extensive, and kind of along with the travel, I suppose, for example, in the league that my university plays in, our conference is called the Mountain West, so that's essentially our league. And there's 3 teams at sea level, and the rest of the teams are all at altitude, and the altitudes vary from 7,500 feet. You'll have to do the translating in terms of meters, but 7,500 feet to 4,000 feet, and kind of everything in between. And so for us being at sea level, these are things that are very difficult that you have to deal with. And I know, some countries don't deal with that at all. And other countries might deal with it with a team or two. So those are really, really unique things. So if when you're thinking about your morpho cycle and you're measuring out how you're planning out your week with not only the training, now you're factoring in really extensive travel and these differences in altitude where there isn't the time to adjust to the altitude. Sometimes these can have great effects on your training ideas and your time to actually prepare the team. So those are some of the main ones that come to mind. Yeah, I'm sure there's others, but hopefully
Yeah.
those are marked differences.
Yeah, but quite interesting, quite interesting. Well, we're about right about time to wrap up this. But before that, I'd like...
Philippe, sorry, one more thing that I
Yeah.
would add to that is technology. Like we are so technology reliant and such technology geeks that we love to have like technology integrated into everything. And certainly in video and things like that, those are places where I find that they actually marry quite well with the tactical periodization. The other places that are a little bit more unique are things like GPS and heart rate monitoring, and we use GPS here at the university, but I have a completely different sort of lens through which I'm looking at the technology of GPS now, since my exposure to the tactical periodization, so that it's more specifically in support of our game ideas and the game model and position specific things, as opposed to the technology and data for data's sake. So that was worth mentioning as well. So
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt you.
No, thank you. It's always very enriching, this. Just to finish, how was or has been your experience at the Professional Master with us?
It's really been amazing for me. And to give a little background that I think you're aware of, but for the listeners, I was actually exposed to tactical periodization while I was on a UEFA course. So it had nothing to do with the course that I was on, but there was a Portuguese coach from Benfica named Renato Paiva, who is currently doing very well. He just won a championship in Ecuador at Independiente del Valle, and he's doing very well there. And anyway, it was my introduction to him, and he expressed that I should look very closely into it. And he was fortunate to study and observe Carlos Carvajal, and at a very young age for himself as a coach. So even though for him the methodology was new, it was for him equally the only methodology that he had actually known, even though it wasn't necessarily from my understanding, it wasn't necessarily fully integrated into the Benfica system overall per se, but that was my personal exposure to it. And but the problem with that in 2013 was that there was virtually no material for me to really study it. And so it's been a massive hunt the whole time for me since then. And it's very difficult to find things in English. It's very difficult to find things that have been translated particularly well in English. It's been, and a lot of the things, unfortunately, had also been kind of bastardized along the way by coaches that have kind of taken this bit from it and that bit from it. And they've made sense of it in their own working and their own methodology, which is totally fair. But what it left me with was, I felt like a very incomplete understanding of the tactical periodization. And it wasn't until I actually entered the master's that I had truly, I've truly been able to synthesize and put all the things that I had learned correctly or incorrectly over the years, but into place, so that it has become a true working methodology for me that now I have a significantly deeper understanding of, and I'm still trying to improve and learn on it. You know, I don't pretend to be a master of it, but my understanding is significantly enriched since being involved with the master program. And you know, and that's really down to the educators. You know, they've been not only clear and extremely comprehensive, but they've also been extremely friendly and helpful, and just, you can sense the joy that the professor gets in sharing, as well as, and I mean Professor Fraud, and you don't have to speak Portuguese to understand his passion and just get such a joy from being involved in it. But certainly that translates into the other educators that are involved in the program, and some of whom are clearly working at the highest level and being very successful with it. So again, the exposure to multiple levels, multiple environments, all these things have been extremely enriching for me. I've been very grateful.
Okay, well, I remember something. We seem that we're away from ending this, but not that much. Right? We really have to end this. But I remember you mentioned Carlos Carvalhal, and before that you were mentioning some cultural differences. And I remember a story that he told us, I think you were there, one of his classes, where he told us a big mistake that he did, and he regretted it so much and for so long, which was when he went coaching into Greece, and the physical culture there was also very, very strong and very present at the club. And the first thing he did, because it was a big thing for him, was to lock down the gym door. You remember that?
Yeah.
And he immediately regretted it, because it was such a shock for the players that he lost the group there.
Yeah.
And he always says, man, I miss those classes. I miss those classes from the professor where he told about coffee and milk, coffee and milk, coffee and milk.
Yes.
And it was a really good story. He's a special guy.
No, and I remember the story really well, and you could clearly see how what a learning lesson that was for him as a young coach. But
yes.
But you can't go to the birthplace of the Olympics and think that athletics isn't going to be important, right? That's on Carlos.
Well, Brian, we really have to finish this. Well, I hope to see you soon, and it was an absolute pleasure to have you with us. And I hope this meets the expectation of all our listeners. And thank you so much for being here. Hope to see you really soon.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It's great to see you as well, and good luck with the rest of it, and keep wishing me luck finishing up the rest of the course.
Yes. Okay, bye everyone. By the way, my name is Filipe Moraes, and I'll be with you shortly for another episode of Tactical Periodization Moments. Thank you so much again, Brian. Hope to see you soon. Take care and stay safe.